In this video, we're going to quickly look at the properties panel and how do I enable the properties panel to make changes to things, and how do I actually let the properties panel know how it can use things. So in the example that we have here, let me just close this quickly. You can see that we have a properties panel, we have a color picker in it. I can make some changes to that, and when I change my menu options here, the properties panel actually changes. And so let's have a look at how that works. In front of me, I've got the designer theme screen here, and the only thing you really need to take away from is this event emitter happening here. So toggle properties panel is the only sort of event that you need to bother with, but we do add the intent. If you don't add the intent, it's actually just going to turn it on and off depending on whether it's visible or not. But if you actually want to toggle it on, but your intent was for the thing to be visible, then just specify that so that it will know, okay, well, you really actually do want this thing to be visible. So if it is already visible, do nothing. And then the second thing is we have a callback on there to say when this property panel is ready, you need to change the context of the properties panel. And so when the properties panel is instantiated through this event, it actually adds the properties panel to the document as a property. And the property panel has a context property that you need to set. This context property has certain things that you must define and other things that doesn't really matter. The things that you have to define are the first two. You need to define the type and you need to define the title. The type determines what is actually going to be loaded into the properties panel. The title determines what the title of the properties panel will display. And if there are additional things that you want to add, you can add them here. Again, we're using convention over code. In the web components, you can see the properties panel folder, and the properties panel folder has a context folder. And the type here actually defines the context type that you want to load. And so this name that you define here has to match this folder in this context type. If I expand these folders, you'll see that the names of the files are exactly the same inside. This is also part of the convention, so that when I load a particular type, it will go look in this folder for the context.javascript file, which would be the code part behind the UI, and then the schema file that actually defines the UI itself. So for the color context, we have a schema file that has some translations in it. We have a variable in here, and this variable is bound to by this input statement that we have here. So we say the field that we want to bind to is this variable. Then when we do make this change, we actually want to push this change down into the context. And so the way we do that is by adding a custom action trigger to say, if this color variable changes, then perform this action for me. And the action that we're performing is context.changeColor. Now the context here is an instance of the class defined in this file here. And the parameters that I'm going to pass onto this function is this variable's value. Let's go and have a look at the JavaScript file. Stock standard file, you need to just add the default and you need to inherit from base context. When you actually set this context here, options changed will fire, and there is an options property on the base context. And if you want to do anything with the information that is passed on to you through this here, you can go and do all of your manipulations from that here. And so in this case, we're setting the title from the options title and the color variable in the schema to the default color defined here. When this color changes and this color change fires, it comes in here. So there's the function name that gets triggered. And then you want to go and do certain operations in that. So that function will fire every time I select a different color. So let's say I want to create a new properties panel for a particular context. Let's say the asset type tree. All I need to do here is create a new folder called, say, asset type tree, and inside of this I want to have a schema file and a context file. So file new context.js and also a schema.json file. And then you just need to fill it in, as you can see from reference looking at the color context. And so when I want to execute that, where I actually perform that event emitter, which I will show you momentarily, theme. When I perform this event emitter, the type must just be the same as the folder name that we created. In this case, it will be asset-type-tree. And that's it.